Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the closing session of the 2012 National Conference. And we have a fantastic panel for you this afternoon. But firstly, I just wanted to give a heads up about next year's conference, which will be in Vancouver, always a fantastic city. June, oh, there's some clapping going on up here for Vancouver. The rivalry's already starting, all good. It's going to be at the Vancouver Convention Centre, and it will be in the Certified Platinum expansion part, so that's all good. And I think June, help me see, CaGBC, June 4th to 6th, 5th, 6th, somewhere around that first week? 5th and 6th, thank you, Thomas. And so that should be an exceptional event. So today, we are very fortunate to have an exceptional group of leaders in the sustainable city realm. This session is focused on green city policies and programs developed in major cities around the world. So over the next hour or so, we'll have a very informative and interactive session around basically three key topics that we've given the panel. And we'll start right away. So firstly, let me introduce Allison Taylor. Allison is Vice President of Sustainability for Siemens, where she drives the sustainability program and agenda for the Americas and acts as a resource for sustainability initiatives across Siemens business sectors. As Siemens expands its sustainability initiatives and strives to improve consistent global implementation of environmental goals, Allison will also be creating and participating in initiatives to advance knowledge, skills, tools, and capabilities company-wide. So thank you, Allison. We'll let Allison present now for about 10 minutes.
Well, good afternoon. I hope that the conference has been as rewarding as I hear. A lot of interesting information, sharing of best practices, which is something I'm going to talk to you about. I had the terrific opportunity of touring the city a little bit this morning by bicycle, by the Smart Bike program, as I would call it, sharing bike program, and that's something that this city has been singled out for in the Green City Index, which I'm going to talk about. Cities earn points for great programs like that, and I really enjoyed taking part myself. So the US and Canada Green City Index is sort of the topic of my talk. I'm going to frame some of the reasons that sustainable communities and buildings have so much in common. Obviously, buildings are a part of a community, but buildings can be communities in and of themselves. Buildings are part of the fabric of a community in a good way. This is economy, this is housing, commerce, but also emissions and waste and water usage, et cetera. So they can be real challenges to cities as well, as you will hear. One thing that my company has been focused on is trying to understand why cities care about sustainability. There's a real trend of urbanization, meaning for the first time in history, more people are living in cities and urban environments than ever before. This is a trend particularly in countries like China, but certainly here in North America as well. And for that reason, cities are really facing challenges. How are they going to house an increasing population, deal with the healthcare needs and access needs of an aging population that's living longer, that's moving into cities? And this is all a sustainability challenge. It's about the long-term future of cities. It's not just about green and use of resources. And we find at Siemens, as an infrastructure company, there's a lot of opportunity for us. So we embarked on the Green City Index, actually over several continents, to try to share best practices among cities, not to figure out winners and losers, but to bring out the best and to show other cities, big and small, whether you are on the index or not, about the great work that's happening in cities. And we found that there's been a lot of interest from cities, from companies, from big cities, from small cities, who we've been meeting with since we've been sending out this index. Just a little background on Siemens, we're an infrastructure technology company. We actually operate in about 190 countries, hence a lot of experience with cities. We've been around for about 160 years, and we have a pretty strong presence here in Canada. We've been around for quite a long time here as well. In North America, we have over 70,000 employees and revenues of a little over 24 billion. So we have seen a lot of growth in our business in cities and a lot of need for green technologies, clean technologies, and real demand from mayors, many of whom are thinking and talking like CEOs, talking about the bottom line effects and impacts of saving energy in particular. So we have a lot in common. So the U.S.-Canada Green City Index is unique. This particular index has 27 cities that the Economist Intelligence Unit, our research partner, has reviewed, 22 in the U.S., 5 in Canada. These cities were selected based upon population, so they didn't opt in or opt out or apply. It's just the largest cities that we decided to study. This builds, as I said, on the indices that we have performed in other continents, and we'll also be releasing Australia, and that should be sometime this fall. It's a tool to help cities learn from one another, and as you see at the bottom of the slide, we have all of these indices on our website. And it's a pretty neat interactive tool, actually. You can go on the website and you can compare one city within one index to another on all of the indicators that we reviewed. So these are the cities that we covered in this particular index. You should be able to count 27, and I've highlighted here the Canadian cities. They were chosen independently, as I said, rather than on an application basis. And let's jump into the categories. So we selected, with the Economist Intelligence Unit, 9 categories and sub-indicators, which are very small print here, but they're about 31 sub-indicators. And the categories, we find, are really the main categories for a comprehensive sustainability outlook within a city. So we, for instance, examined environmental governance. Does the city have a plan? Does it have teeth? Is it enforceable? Is it effective? Carbon dioxide emissions. That, by the way, was a real challenge, finding data that was fair and measured in the same way across all 27 cities. That was very difficult. Some cities don't have those relationships with their utilities or their businesses and don't have that day-to-day kind of data. Energy usage, land use, buildings, transportation, water, waste, and air emissions. That's not CO2, but that's emissions like NOx and SOx. There were qualitative indicators, so judgments made by the Economist Intelligence Unit about the quality of programs or policies or the innovative thinking that's happening within a city, and also quantitative indicators, actually measuring and comparing emissions of air or water or waste programs and waste volumes. Waste, for instance, would be recycling programs, composting programs, that sort of thing. Land use, for instance, takes a look at the density of a city and also the green space that that city maintains, as well as the policies in place for land use. So here's the bottom line, or the top line, if you will. Here's our performers on the index, and the ones that are circled here sort of highlighting where our Canadian performers stack up. No doubt, as you can see, the Canadian cities did quite well in the index. All 5 of them have comprehensive programs that cover all 9 of those indicators, and that's always a recipe for success in this particular index. And they performed quite well with respect to all of those indicators as well. I would say, as in most of North America, the challenge for these cities is transportation policy, getting people around and investing in the very expensive infrastructure, particularly in a difficult economy. We saw that particular trend everywhere. Vancouver performed extremely well. Number 2 in the index, just a couple of points away from San Francisco, also sitting on our panel here, so I think there's probably going to be a healthy competition. New York, Mayor Bloomberg, when the index came out, New York was number 3. Bloomberg tweeted and said he's on San Francisco's heels, so speaking of a little bit of healthy competition, that's one thing we may not have anticipated about the index, but we think that's great. People are looking at this and wanting to improve their scores. Another thing, if you take a look, is the index at the bottom. Again, it's not winners and losers, but there's something very stark here. There's a real difference between the points that the cities at the top of the index earned and those at the bottom of the index, and that's a reflection of a lot of different things. Economy being one, dependence on fossil fuels for an energy supply being another. Canada fared quite well, most of the cities, because there's a lot of hydropower in usage in Canada, and that's a low carbon source of energy. And I can talk a little bit later about some of the particular assets that all of these cities presented. And just to sort of highlight how the top performers performed, as you can see, they're at the top of the indicators in almost every category. So that means these are cities, Vancouver and San Francisco, that have had programs in place for a long time. They've been consistent through various administrations. They have been pursuing broad programs and innovating into different areas. And their constituents are obviously driving this. Citizen input and the citizens caring about these programs is what sustains these programs from one political administration to another. Our key learnings, there are several. Wealth certainly helps, as in many studies you find that. It allows choices for individuals. As I showed you, those cities at the bottom of the index don't seem to be doing very well economically right now, but it's not a prerequisite. We found that the GDP of a lot of these cities was not necessarily an indicator of who was going to be at the top of the index. Effective planning matters, coordination, transparency, a comprehensive perspective across all of the indicators, and communication. That way, your constituents who care about these issues can also participate and understand and learn, such as learning about energy efficiency and retrofitting their own homes. Persistence is essential. Early adoption shows in the results, and persistence through the years certainly does as well. And progress comes through actual action. And there's several paths to success. These are 4 very different cities that were at the top of the index. They don't have that much in common geographically or even demographically or with respect to their wealth. Los Angeles is a much more sprawling city than New York. Nevertheless, these are cities that fared well in the index. Wealthier cities at both of the coast are near the top. Again, there's a lot of choices in the wealthier cities, and Canadian cities rank higher than wealth would predict. One trend we certainly saw across the index is federal policies, countrywide policies, haven't necessarily, or very much have not, slowed down progress within cities. Cities are really the incubators of green and clean technologies. They're really the innovators for sustainability. They're not waiting for policies and politicians to tell them what to do. They're finding interesting, innovative financing mechanisms and putting those policies into place and into action. And you'll hear more about that on the panel as well. Finally, these are some of the things that we see are the solutions for sustainable cities. All 9 of these indicators kind of beg for all kinds of technology and solutions to solve problems or to prevent problems, especially as cities are seeing increasing populations. Smart grid is a new and sexy technology that we're asked quite frequently about. A lot of people don't ask us quite so much about water technology, for instance, but there's a tremendous energy savings in new water technologies, and energy and water are very related. Oftentimes, a city's largest bill, largest cost, is tied to its water treatment. We also see that in the healthcare sector, there's a new awakening with respect to sustainability. Hospitals are huge energy consumers, and many of them sit right in the middle of cities, and they're also community centers where a lot of people come and learn a great deal about their community. So it's a great learning opportunity to take a hospital through, for instance, a greening or a LEED certification process. And we find that not only are hospitals benefiting for their bottom line, but the cities are also being able to educate their citizens while they learn about what that building is all about. So I'm going to conclude here so that our panelists can dive more deeply into actual city examples, and I look forward to our questions.
Thank you, Allison. So we're going to start off with Team Vancouver. I know that Chris from Team Sydney is already thinking they would have blown this index away, but nonetheless, we've had Allison give us a framework and look at a tool to be able to rate cities, which of course the the America cities we have represented have fared very well. So our next panelist is Dave Ramsley. Kudos to Dave, because Sadhu Johnson, who was supposed to be here as the Deputy City Manager for Vancouver, unfortunately had a family emergency. So kudos to Dave, because he got on a plane fast and has been put in the hot seat. Dave manages the City of Vancouver's Sustainable Development Programs. He is the program manager. He is responsible for developing and delivering programs and policies that support Vancouver's sustainability objectives. His current projects include developing a strategic plan to achieve carbon neutral new buildings, citywide by 2020, implementing a comprehensive building retrofit program, and creating a green jobs training program. I don't know what you do on the weekends. Dave oversaw the development of Vancouver's Green Home program in 2009, widely regarded as the greenest building code in North America. Dave also formerly sat on the board of directors for the Cascadia Regional Green Building Councils, which is one of the chapters of the Canadian Green Building Council. Please help me in welcoming Dave.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hi. I apologize for not being Sadhu Johnston for a lot of reasons. And I just wanted to, what happened with Sadhu is that his wife put out her back quite badly and had to go to the hospital. So I guess Sadhu could have come to the conference, but he just wouldn't have able to be, to go home afterwards. So that was why they sent me. And I don't think that he would necessarily be able to find a lot of work out here. I'm not sure that Rob Ford would be interested in hiring Sadhu Johnston necessarily, but we'll move on from that. So the topic of my presentation today will be about why cities are central to creating a sustainable future for us. I love, and kudos to the CaGBC for the theme of this conference and the theme of this talk, moving beyond green buildings to green cities. I think it's a fantastic and prescient subject matter, and that's not just because I'm a green buildings guy whose job is to green cities, although that might be 25% of the reason. But I think that from a leadership perspective, which is what I'll focus on first, that cities are uniquely well positioned and are actually, the level of government that's taking action on the sustainability agenda right now. Secondly, I'll talk about why cities are going to be the solution providers to achieve that next level of sustainability, that regenerative level of sustainability that I think we're going to need to hit very quickly in the next decade. And then I also want to talk finally about how cities can talk about these goals and targets with their citizens to actually achieve these outcomes, because I think it's a really big issue that we all face who work in civic governance. So I'll start off with this slide. I typically call it the what's not there slide. And to set it up for you is that the City of Vancouver is one of the few jurisdictions that's on track to meet its Kyoto obligations, and that will be 6% below 1990 levels by the end of this year when our landfill gas recovery project finishes. What's not there on this slide is that in that same period of time, we have grown in size by our population has grown by 27%, our jobs have grown by 21%, and we have consistently scored in the top 3 on livability indexes for the past decade. So for anybody out there who tells you that, and I'm talking to you, Stephen Harper, that says that, addressing greenhouse gases in a meaningful way will affect your quality of life and will make you less competitive, they obviously haven't been to Vancouver, or maybe they're just spending more time in Fort McMurray. But what also is not on this slide is you see that there is a real lack of federal commitment to greenhouse gas reductions. And I would say that we're living in the post-Copenhagen era, where federal governments really have kind of stepped back from a lot of their climate change commitments that have been made earlier, and it's now actually cities that are taking the leadership. At the same time, there's this step back by federal governments. Over 500 jurisdictions in North America at the civic level have signed on to deep greenhouse gas reductions. That's both in Canada and the United States, which is a groundswell of support. What I would also say to you is that the civic governments are leading this initiative not through the traditional way that we've seen greenhouse gas reductions at the federal level, with doom and gloom projections of drought and famine and sea level rise. They're leading it through hope. and morality. And they're talking about green job creation. They're talking about building resilient cities. They're talking about reinventing their economy. And I think that's wise to do, because as we've seen, that we can have all the data in the world and we can make all the cataclysmic projections possible, but it might not actually compel action. So I'll start here with why cities are essential to the conversation around building beyond green buildings to green cities. And for those of you who've seen my presentations before, I often liken the invention of the green building, or where we've been at with green buildings for the past 10 years, to the invention of the personal computer. They're both gray, square, boxy, and hard to optimize. That's it. I'm just kidding. What I will say about the personal computer is that when it was introduced in the 1980s, we were told that it was going to be this incredibly powerful tool of the future that was going to change our lives. It was going to change the way we worked, the way we communicated, the way we played. But what we found when we brought these computers home is that in isolation in our second bedrooms or on the kitchen table, they really didn't change our lives. They actually sat around for about 15 years and were essentially expensive typewriters, or a way to generate a spreadsheet in isolation. But computers eventually did change our lives. They did change the way we do business. They changed the way that we communicate fundamentally. And what happened? What promoted that change? I won't let you make it shout it out, but basically it was the internet, right? It was an infrastructure platform that allowed all of these computers in isolation to be collectively more than the sum of their parts. And I think that's where we are today with green buildings. When we're talking about regenerative design, like Ray Cole was talking about this morning, we're talking about buildings that when they network together can become not just more energy efficient, more like say 30% better than some baseline, but actually become more than the sum of their parts. So the example I would use around this is our net zero energy building. It's a building that actually produces as much energy as it needs over the course of a year. And the way it's able to do that is it's part of a low carbon district energy system. Now, what's not important is the low carbon district energy system. What's important is the network that allows that building to share surplus renewable energy that it can't use because it produces too much with its neighbors. So this is a building that is actually not reductive in terms of being more energy efficient or more conservation minded. It's a building that actually greens the neighborhood that it's a part of. This is a huge paradigm shift. This is beyond green building, and this is a building that actually helps its neighbors, and it's required if we're going to hit a lot of our targets. So cities are good at building infrastructure. That's one of the few things that we're really good at. And we're not just talking about energy infrastructure when we can talk about becoming more than the sum of our parts. We can talk about building separated bike lanes, which for the first time brings a new demography into cycling commuting that wasn't there before with just painted bike lanes. We can talk about building infrastructure for low carbon vehicles, and this infrastructure is more delivered at fostering market adoption and overcoming the anxieties that people may have in terms of adopting electric vehicle technology than it really is about providing electricity to these vehicles. I mean, 80 to 90% of electric vehicle charging will happen at home and at work. But in order for us to see a lot of adoption of electric vehicles, we need very visible public charging infrastructure, and cities can provide that. Other things that we can do is we can reutilize existing underutilized infrastructure, things like parking lots, like these ones close to our stadiums, and loan it out to food cooperatives, which provides healthy food and job training programs to inner city residents. That when I talk about infrastructure being the hardware of cities, these new co-ops and governance models around sustainability are the software of it. So, when we have cooperatives, or in this case, a green jobs training program, which we launched last year with a $100,000 grant from the city of Vancouver and some matching grants from a local credit union, we were able to train 4 people in air sealing and energy efficiency retrofits. Well, that $100,000 that we invested has now created a social enterprise, a not-for-profit, that'll do about $750,000 worth of business this year, all in green retrofits. So the good thing about the software platform is, unlike the infrastructure or the hardware, the more you use the software, the more valuable it becomes and the more effective it becomes, unlike infrastructure, which tends to wear out over time. So I think that by combining both good infrastructure investments with good programs and policy design, that we can actually start to make some huge leap forward on the sustainability agenda. So how do we talk about it? Well, I, for one, am really sick of trying to sell conservation to these people. I mean, you know, this is the generation that has been told that they are the smartest, most talented generation and that they can do whatever they want to and that they're capable of great things. And trying to sell conservation to this generation is not actually really possible. What we have to aspire to more. We have to aspire to better solutions, to this regenerative design. The only people that's actually harder to sell conservation to than this generation are these guys. Right? In terms of business, you know, if we've actually valued saving and conservation in our culture, we wouldn't be in the financial mess that we're in right now. But if we can sell carbon positive buildings, if we can sell high performance buildings, I think we can actually start to make some real inroads. You know, I think to finally close off with, this whole idea of regenerative design or carbon positive cities actually fits better within our cultural paradigm. I mean, when you think about all of our big celebrations that we collectively partake in, the Olympics, you know, the Euro Cup that's going on right now, you know, any movie that we like to see, any opera that we take in is always about achieving something. And right now, carbon neutrality doesn't sound like an achievement, but being carbon positive or being regenerative really does. And this was embodied at a stakeholder committee I was at last week, where we were talking about becoming carbon neutral in our operations as a city. And the idea that we may have to purchase some offsets at some point to do that. And that is actually a very tough sell for taxpayers. But I think it would actually be easier to sell a carbon positive plan to taxpayers, where we can actually say that for your investment, that the city of Vancouver is actually going to become a carbon sink, and we're actually going to become an asset to the environment. That is a much easier conversation to have with the taxpayer than trying to get them to value neutrality. I mean, the only people who value neutrality are the Swiss, right? They don't live in Vancouver. So I'll just leave it there, but you know, I think that there is new ways that we can talk, new ways that we can lead, and new ways that we can build that will get beyond green buildings to greener cities. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Dave. So the person who got the most points for greatest travel was our next speaker, Chris Dirksema, coming from Sydney, Australia. Chris is the Sustainability Director for the City of Sydney. And at the city, Chris manages a multidisciplinary team responsible for developing and implementing policy, strategy, and programs to improve the environmental performance of council's operations and the community. He played an integral role in the development of Sustainable Sydney 2030, which he spoke about yesterday, and I did hear from a number of people they were blown away by the presentation, which is a vision for the future of Sydney. He is now responsible for implementing actions to achieve the city's environmental goals, including the development of the Green Infrastructure Master Plan, which includes distributed energy, trigen and renewables, waste to energy technology, and total water cycle management. Chris.
First of all, my flight was carbon neutral, so we, fortunately, a couple of years ago, we convinced the council to go carbon neutral, and so we were the first Australian government department to be carbon neutral in Australia. So that was one of the quick wins that we could have while we undertook a lot of these heavier actions to get us to our goal. Look, really, I'm going to give you a bit of an overview of Sustainable Sydney 2030 and some of the major components and the things that we're doing in order to achieve our target. Sustainable Sydney 2030, we developed that in 2008. It was really a call to action. So it was phrased around what kind of city would you like to live in 2030? You know, we're a wealthy nation, we're a wealthy city, we can really be anything we want to be. And so we had that conversation with businesses, with residents, with visitors, and 98% of all those stakeholders, including business, wanted urgent and significant action on climate change. And as a result, we ended up setting a target for greenhouse gas reduction of 70% reduction by 2030 based on 2006 levels. And that was not based on what we knew we could achieve, it was actually based on what we felt we were morally obligated to achieve given the IPCC 2 degrees climate change sort of target. So this is the same trajectory as the 80% based on 1990 by 2050 trajectory. We did, however, do some analysis, and in that analysis we said, okay, well, where are we now? So on the left-hand side of this is what we call our waterfall chart, and a very cornerstone, I suppose, diagram for us. And on the left-hand side, we have the business as usual of 2006, what we projected to be in 2030, and then a suite of actions that would take us down to the target. Not really, I'm going to go through them in detail, but there's a series of energy efficiency, green infrastructure, car park reductions as well, and that's the lighting and ventilation associated with reduced car parking in the city, a whole bunch of renewable energy initiatives as well. And this was a very pragmatic approach, and in that these are things we thought we could actually achieve given the technology and the financial constraints that we had at the time. And as you can see, there's actually a gap there, a deficit of 17%. And that was a bit of an uneasy thing to sort of communicate to the Lord Mayor, that we actually had to go out and say, look, here's the target, but we know we can't achieve our target. But that has really put the pressure on all of us in the city government and all the stakeholders that we work with to make sure that every single project that we do extracts every last tonne of greenhouse gas reduction. We take a fairly simple approach to the sustainability actions, a three-pronged approach through greening our own operations, through helping the community and the stakeholders to do the same, and then finally transformational change through green infrastructure. And I'm just going to briefly talk about the second one there, working with the community. As some of you heard yesterday that I talked about, we have developed a Better Buildings partnership. We've done that with 14 property portfolio owners who own approximately 60% of the office space in the downtown area, so a very small number of players who own a very significant part of the city. That, I suppose, provides us a very simple and capable mechanism for actually implementing the actions and partnering with those people who actually own the buildings to implement these actions. The Green Building Council of Australia is also an associate member on this program. The other one that we recently implemented was environmental upgrade agreements. And this is an innovative financial mechanism based similar to PACE financing, in that a building owner can arrange finance with a financial provider. However, instead of having to repay the financial provider directly, the property actually has a charge placed on it, and council take that charge from the land and then pass that back to the finance provider. And in doing so, provides a super secured loan, and therefore the finance providers can provide it at a lower rate. And it also allows a mechanism for, we find this is better for actually second tier building owners, so not those high-end players who can get finance quite easily already, but those who may not have been able to access finance to do environmental upgrades. The other part to this financial mechanism is that the legislation allows the building owner to pass on some of the cost to the tenant. So there's a litmus test there that obviously the tenant's outgoings may be reduced from an environmental upgrade, but the building owner can't charge them any more money than what they were originally paying in their outgoings. So, but at least it starts to get over this split incentive issue between tenants and landlords. We also have a tenancy program that focuses purely on office tenants. And I should say the reason we've had two sort of property-related programs is because 50% of the greenhouse, or over 50% of the greenhouse profile of the city, is caused by our commercial property sector. And so in Australia we have a rating tool called Neighbours. It rates energy, operational energy use, and there's a tool specifically just for tenants. So it's great that we get all these organisations going, yeah, I want to be in a green building, fantastic, but you really need to call them to action and say, well, is your office being operated in a green way as well? And this, I suppose this is a way that we can allow those organisations to demonstrate their corporate social responsibility and make sure that they're also achieving 4 out of 5 stars or better in their energy ratings as well. And I should say, look, the reason we have had such I suppose, a shift in energy performance in Australia with a lot of our buildings has been because of the rating tools that are available in Australia. Very a strong take-up of Green Star and also of Neighbours. And those institutional owners that we had in the top 14 there for the Better Buildings Partnership, I should say, because of that institutional ownership, there's been a very good culture of reporting. And that means that 6 out of the top 10 of the Dow Jones Sustainability Index are actually Australian property companies based in Sydney. And there's other factors at play. So there's other pieces of legislation. These are the top one there, the National Greenhouse Energy Reporting Scheme and the Energy Efficiency Opportunities are 2 pieces of legislation that are federal legislation that force large energy users to actually report publicly on their energy use. And the second one there actually forces them to report on the energy efficiency opportunities that they identify in those portfolios as well. We've also, as of last year, implemented commercial building disclosure. So at point of sale, for any building above 2,000 square metres, you must report your neighbour's energy rating publicly. And then, of course, on the 1st of July, we have a carbon price coming in as well. So other external factors that are all creating an environment for change around commercial building operation. But really, look, the big elephant in the room is that 80% of the emissions are from coal-fired power. So really, if we're going to make inroads into the carbon footprint, we really need to look at how we green up the supply of energy. So we developed a green infrastructure master plan, 5 components: trigeneration, renewables, waste and water. And I'll just quickly skim through those. I'm going to skim over this. Trigeneration really is just a gas-fired engine, utilising the waste heat for heating and utilising the heating for cooling as well. This is the greenhouse profile. We actually had extensive data. We could map out the carbon intensity of the energy uses around the city. And when we implement trigeneration, this is the modelling or the reduction the modelling shows. And when we did all that modelling and we did the business modelling, we found that this is the kind of area that we could cover within the city using an economic model that had a commercial return for operators. And also the other thing that we did in the economic modelling was to show that this solution was actually the best solution besides not using energy at all. So energy efficiency is always number one, but this was the second most cost-effective action that we could implement at the city. We've also done a renewable energy master plan that will be launched later this year, and really we took an approach of doing resource mapping. And out of that, we've also set a target of 30% renewables being generated for the City of Sydney, and we used a proximity principle. So we wanted most of that renewable to be generated within the city, and that's why we mapped it all out, the resource, and we could see that we could actually generate 55% within the city boundaries, that's using PV predominantly, and that 45% would have to be generated elsewhere. We also did the same thing with renewable gases as well. So not only renewable electricity, but renewable gases, how much waste is being produced in the region outside Sydney that could be converted into some sort of renewable gas. And we mapped that out and we realised that almost 95% of the gas that we needed in our Trigen scheme could be provided from these waste to gas sources. We also took a very similar approach with water. You know, we have this floor space census data. We then compared that to energy use, water use data that we got provided by the water utility and came up with a water use model and looking at it holistically in a decentralised fashion. So water efficiency, stormwater and water recycling. And that allowed us to generate these kind of outcomes. So we know, or we predicted out to 2030 where the water is being used, how much is being used in different sectors, and therefore allows us to set a water efficiency target. And also we determined how much of that water could be provided through a recycled water source, and that allowed us to map out the opportunity within the city for recycled water. All these master plans allowed us to review the original waterfall chart that we did, and we've reduced that gap of 17% now down to 4%, and I'm hoping that we can get rid of that 4% in the next 18 years or so. So finally, I think, look, each council or each government agency really needs to lead by example as well. You know, you can't be driving or pushing the industry to do these kind of things unless you're really doing it yourselves. And so we have energy efficiency targets of 48% for our own property portfolio. By the end of this year, we should have achieved about 40% of that target. LED lighting, all the lights that we own in the city, we're converting to LED lights, and we've got on board a contractor to do that. At the moment, we're converting to the GE LED lights. Renewable energy as well. We have a renewable energy fund, and we're going to be awarding a contractor to implement that in the coming week, and that'll be help us achieve our 30% renewable energy target just for the council. We're also implementing Trigen ourselves as well, and we've got quite an innovative model there that we've partnered with a large energy provider in the city. So the city doesn't want to, but we're not experts in providing decentralised energy, so we partnered with an organisation who is. And that arrangement allows the council to own the insulated hot water network while the energy provider providing the energy to the final customer. And then finally, look, I think with all these initiatives, really you've got to be, you've got to bring all the stakeholders along on the journey. You've got to be very honest about your achievements. You've got to be honest about where you are, and really get real about the magnitude of the targets that you need to achieve. If you really do believe that there's a climate change issue, you really need to set significant targets in order to achieve, to do something about that. And when you start to face that kind of magnitude of problem, you actually realise you've got to do a lot more than what we're actually doing now. And yes, we're tinkering around the edges at some of these energy efficiency programs, but really we've got to have transformational change in order to really do something about the problem. So we now produce quarterly sustainability reports. We have an annual State of the City report back to all our stakeholders. We report a 10-year financial plan back to all our stakeholders. Green infrastructure is the single largest capital work item that we have in our 10-year plan, and that has been endorsed by our stakeholders, and also that the Lord Mayor has been re-elected on that platform as well. So we have very strong leadership around this kind of issue as well. So I think I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Our fourth panelist, but we do know from Allison's talk actually, who ranks currently first in the Siemens US and Canada Green City Index, is Melanie Neuder. Melanie is the director of the San Francisco Department of the Environment, a department which helps all San Francisco residents and businesses take an active role in protecting and enhancing the urban environment, produces and publicizes information on sustainable practices, and develops innovative and practical environmental programs for all residents. Melanie founded and chairs the Energy and Environmental Circle for the Full Circle Fund, and with the help of former Vice President Al Gore, and Green Jobs advocate, listen to me, I'm already moving them on, and Green Jobs advocate Van Jones. Melanie has a grassroots environmental approach and is an organizer with Greenbelt Alliance, the Public Interest Research Group, known as PIRG, and Green Corps. Melanie.
Good afternoon. So I understand that I'm the last speaker here at this conference, so I'm very excited to have an opportunity to share San Francisco's story before we get into a little bit of discussion. And certainly as the city that did get the #1 award as a greenest city in North America from Siemens, I hope that I can do the city justice and tell you all about our wonderful programs today. Look forward to the discussion. So first of all, wanted to talk about something that you've heard a little bit about today already, which is why do cities matter? Both Allison and Dave did address this issue, and it's something that is really a guiding principle for us in San Francisco to take additional action. As you've heard, cities are a core part of the problem. Cities around the world do account for 2% of the land mass of our planet, yet are responsible for 80% of the planet's carbon emissions and 75% of the world's energy consumption. Also, as Allison mentioned, over half of the world's population now does live in cities. So cities also do have the most to lose from climate change impacts, whether it is rising sea levels or changes in weather patterns that will impact our local communities and the economy. So while cities are a primary problem and cause of the issue throughout the world, we must be part of the solution. We must take local action. Dave also did address the fact that there are stalls at both the federal and international level on climate change action, so it really is going to be up to cities to help to solve this problem. So locally in San Francisco, as you may know, the city and county of San Francisco is about 7 by 7 miles. It's and a population of 800,000 people. We are surrounded by water on 3 sides, so we are quite dense, and we're also particularly vulnerable to climate change. And just this year, we have completed and gotten a third-party verified greenhouse gas emissions inventory for 2010. The good news is that using all of the tools in our toolbox, ranging from setting ambitious goals, to implementing innovative policies, to conducting extensive outreach and education, we have been able to reduce our carbon footprint in San Francisco by 14.5% below 1990 levels, and that's doubling our reductions over the Kyoto Protocol target for San Francisco of 7%. This is certainly something to celebrate. However, we do know that in San Francisco, 56% of our remaining carbon emissions are from buildings, and 39% are from cars and trucks. So in order to make further reductions, we must tackle carbon emissions in these areas. So in San Francisco, being a sustainability means not only taking bold local action to reduce our carbon emissions from the built environment and from the transportation sector, it also means that we do need to take an integrated approach that will expand economic opportunities, enhance each community's livability, and make our city smarter. San Francisco, as you might know, has always been willing and interested in taking risks that keep San Francisco in the lead on environmental issues. With strong support of our previous mayor, Mayor Gavin Newsom, as well as our new mayor, Mayor Ed Lee, and the Board of Supervisors, our city we began setting ambitious goals and targets over a decade ago. These goals, supported by our innovative local policies, financial incentives, and a robust outreach and education program, have helped us ensure the success that we've had to date. And so specifically, what does being a sustainable city mean in San Francisco? First and foremost, our sustainable city is built green. San Francisco has some of the most aggressive green building policies in the world. On the municipal side, our municipal green building program was established by ordinance back in 1999, which was amended to require LEED Silver certification for municipal new construction and major renovation projects in 2004, and amended to require LEED Gold certification in 2011. Leading by example, there are currently 63 municipal projects seeking LEED certification, including 3 museums, 2 hospitals, 10 branch libraries, and an airport terminal totaling nearly 9 million square feet at a value of over $4 billion. Citywide, San Francisco has the most LEED certified buildings per capita than any other city in our country. Green buildings have achieved extensive citywide market penetration. More than 35 million square feet have earned LEED certification to date. And in the office market, more than 37% of competitive office properties have earned LEED certification, and 75% have earned the Energy Star rating in 2010. A sustainable San Francisco is also energy efficient. Over the past 7 years, we've partnered with our local utility, PG&E, to run something called the Energy Watch program. This is a public-private partnership that has helped thousands of small businesses throughout San Francisco to reduce their energy bills through rebates, providing energy efficiency retrofits. Just over the past 3 years alone, we have reached over 4,000 businesses, saving them an average of about $4,500 per year on their bill, which has also resulted in 40,000 tons of carbon reduction locally. We also just launched a new initiative. This was an ordinance called the Existing Commercial Building Ordinance, which requires that all commercial buildings in San Francisco that are 10,000 square feet and over do need to report their energy use annually to the city. This ordinance was essentially designed to inspire building upgrades that can help buildings, of course, save money on their energy bill, as well as decrease vacancy rates. We did also launch a companion financing program called Green Finance SF. This is a property-assessed clean energy program that provides building owners access to funding for building upgrades that can be amortized on their property tax bill over time. So the idea is that this new financing mechanism, coupled with our existing commercial building ordinance, really help to create a robust market for energy efficiency through information collection and financial support above and beyond the many buildings that have already taken action in San Francisco. So a sustainable San Francisco is also renewably powered. Our previous mayor, Mayor Gavin Newsom, set a very ambitious goal of wanting San Francisco to be renewably powered by 100% renewable energy in the next 10 years. Right now, we're at 41% renewable, which comes from a cleaner energy mix from our local utility, as well as from clean municipal power. And one innovation that has helped us organically grow our solar adoption in San Francisco is our solar map. Similar to what Chris showed for Sydney, we have a map that shows solar potential as well as wind potential for residents and businesses throughout San Francisco. That map, as well as along with financial rebates, have helped us to achieve 19 megawatts of in-city solar from about 3,000 solar PV installations. And although we are not very close to 100% renewable yet, we do have quite a gap that we need to fill in the next 10 years. There is a proposed community choice aggregation program that would allow San Franciscans to access 100% renewable power as an option to our local utility, and that would, of course, help us get closer to our ambitious goal. Hopefully that program will be launching this summer. Our sustainable city puts transit first and is EV ready. I do apologize for the product placement. This was the best slide that I could find representing EVs in San Francisco. We do work with all electric vehicle companies. In any case, for the past 4 decades, San Francisco has been a transit-first city, prioritizing getting people out of their cars, walking, biking, and public transit. Today, we do have a trolley system and a streetcar fleet that is powered by our municipal utility that provides renewable energy, and we also use biofuels in our hybrid buses. But even with our transit-first policies, electric vehicles still are essential to helping us meet our carbon reduction goals. We are working to become the EV capital of the US and have so far installed about 79 charging stations at 35 locations throughout San Francisco. A sustainable city in San Francisco is less wasteful. San Francisco is proud to lead the nation in waste diversion with a 78% waste diversion rate. That means that 78% of our waste is currently being recycled, composted, or reused. And this really comes from our easy-to-use 3-bin system, combined with financial incentives and a citywide recycling and composting mandate. This has really helped to provide incentives for strong adoption of our zero-waste ethic in San Francisco by residents and businesses. Also, our private sector partner, Recology, has also developed a unique infrastructure that focuses on resource recovery over landfilling, and they are also committed to helping the city reach our zero-waste goal by 2020. Sustainable San Francisco also means integrating all of these individual elements into a complete neighborhood and achieving sustainable development. A number of exemplary sustainable communities are being developed locally. These include the Transbay Terminal. This is a 1.3 million square foot Transbay Transit Center, which is expected to open in 2017 with a LEED Gold rating. This terminal will be designed with a water management system, which is expected to reduce water use by about 54%. The facility's gray water and storm water will be captured and filtered and reused on a rooftop park. There are 2 other sustainable communities that are planned for the next decade. Treasure Island, which is one of the 18 Clinton Climate Initiative climate positive developments, as well as the Bayview Hunters Point Shipyard. It will be the first community in San Francisco that will be powered by 100% renewable power through our municipal utility. And of course, a sustainable city in San Francisco is a city that not only helps the environment, but helps local residents. And Forbes magazine recently noted that San Francisco has the largest number of green jobs available in the US. Being within just a few miles of Silicon Valley, it's no surprise that we do have an abundance of jobs in the clean transportation, clean technology, energy efficiency, and energy storage fields. And some of our local government sustainability programs are also helping to create and sustain jobs. A couple examples are our Energy Watch program creates or sustains about 180 jobs per year. Our Zero Waste partner, Recology, employs over 1,000 employees to help us implement our Zero Waste program. And our Go Solar SF rebate program for solar installations did hire 21 new employees from disadvantaged communities through our city's workforce development program. So just in closing, being a sustainable city in San Francisco does mean that all of these elements get integrated into the community. Our communities are more bountiful with a citywide commitment to increasing urban agriculture and community gardens, more connected and innovative with new technologies and apps like SF Park, which is essentially congestion pricing at the meter level, which I'm happy to talk more about. More accessible with about 50% more bike lanes that were installed in the past year, and more livable with about 25 parklets that have sprouted up in our merchant corridors, an ever-growing world-class park system, as well as a Green Streets Connector program that's helping to improve local biodiversity. So what's next for San Francisco and what challenges lie ahead? We are working to become a smarter, more connected city, a city where we can see the different sectors of transportation, energy, and buildings connected through technology, and we're perfectly suited to be a city that is a smart city. We have sworn off siloed solutions and are really working towards taking an integrated approach where technology, innovation help us achieve that goal, and that we are also collaborating among all stakeholders. Couple things on the horizon. We are rolling out our Eco Districts initiative that integrates all of these individual sustainability solutions at a neighborhood scale. And finally, working on our adaptation plan, ensuring that if we can't ward off the worst effects of climate change through our mitigation measures, we will have a good adaptation plan in place. So just in closing, we do look forward to a future where San Francisco is not simply one of a dozen cities that are taking these kinds of approaches throughout the world, but thousands of cities, and our future depends on it. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Melanie, and you kind of answered my last question with your last bit, but we'll get to that. So in terms of a couple of questions, I think what we're going to do is probably have about 2 minutes per city, and then I'll let Allison look at it from a holistic way with about a minute each at the end. So firstly, and you guys can figure out who should go first, but cities tended to look at environmental issues in a fragmented way, building by building, infrastructure project by infrastructure project. Why did your city choose to go in a more holistic route? And in your opinion, what are the benefits of a broader sustainable approach to city building?
Look, I'll start. I think the holistic approach, really when you look at cities are they're complex systems. And just like any business case that you do within any organisation, if you set the boundaries too small, you get very the wrong kind of answers. You have lots of externalities that you haven't included in your business cases, and therefore you get the wrong outcomes. So logically, if you're looking at a complex system like a city, you really do need to take a more holistic approach if you're going to try and come up with the right types of solutions. And I suppose one of the examples of that is with our Better Buildings partnership. A lot of those players have done a lot of work in energy efficiency with their buildings. And they're really starting to hit the ceiling of what is economically feasible to undertake within the building itself in terms of energy efficiency. And I suppose the city's work, we're starting to complement that by providing the decentralised energy solution and showing that actually that's the most or the most economic next thing to do, rather than continuing to work on the building itself and maybe having to do facade changes and those sort of things. They're very expensive. It's actually cheaper to then connect into a district-type scheme. So you wouldn't come up with answers like that if you were looking at individual buildings by themselves.
Thank you.
I can go. I would say there's 3 things that sort of were seminal in terms of our approach in becoming more holistic. So number 1 was we spent about 10 years developing our Southeast Falls Creek Master Plan, which was a model sustainable community, which we built on a brownfield site in downtown Vancouver. And there was 10 years of dialogue about creating what a model sustainable community would look like, and then 3 years of building it before the Olympics. And I think that sort of interdepartmental working team that had to start essentially from zero and then come to a full community that ended up scoring LEED Platinum and D, most points ever been scored before, was a tremendous learning experience. We all kind of got our postgraduate degrees in urban sustainability through that project, and actually saw the co-benefits of working together on that scheme. I'd say the other, similar to what's just been said, the Greenest City Action Team coming up with, which was a mayor's task force on sustainability, set 10 really bold targets. And the governance that went inside, both San Francisco and Vancouver, I saw scored low on the environmental governance side. So yeah, it was previous to the Green City Action Team, but it was that these goals and targets were distributed to departmental general managers and directors at the staff level. And they were very ambitious targets that were assigned to them, and they realized quickly that their own internal budgets and powers were not enough to be able to accomplish these targets, they would be forced to work together. And then I think the final thing is that, you know, further to the internal governance structure is that the sustainability group at the City of Vancouver is actually a department of the city manager's office, and it sits there, not say in planning or in engineering, because it's supposed to work cross-departmentally and across silos to try to find those solutions. And it's actually, we've added value on other files whereby, you know, maybe not even environmentally related or sustainability related programs, but just because we're involved with so many departments across the organization, you know, we've been able to sort of help in terms of finding other efficiencies and process improvements while we're implementing sustainability initiatives. So I'd say it's about, you know, having one key project was a big learning experience, and then I think it's actually getting your systems and governance internally right.
Thank you,
And
Melanie.
I would say in San Francisco, there's really two driving factors. One is, I think, similar to Vancouver, where we realize that we've got 50 different city departments that all have some component of working on sustainability, whether it's the planning department, it's transportation, it's Department of the Environment, it's the water department. And so that sort of forced us to think a little bit more holistically, because there wasn't one department that was just in charge of all of these measures. And so I think the governance structure has actually forced us to think more holistically. I think the second element is really thinking about sustainability from a people-centric perspective. So when you're just greening a building or you're just installing an EV charger, the experience of the community isn't one where they necessarily feel part of a sustainable community. But so when you're thinking about how are we going to serve the residents of San Francisco and how are they going to experience the city as a sustainable city, it does require an integrated, holistic approach. So that thinking has also driven a holistic approach for San Francisco.
Allison, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah. I'll observe that one thing I know about sustainability in my experience in the corporate world as well is that it is about getting out of the silos. When we go to a customer, be it a city or be it another business, and we're talking about energy efficiency, just as Melanie said, we're talking about every piece of that enterprise that contributes to energy consumption. So we're looking at somebody's water use and their buildings, and we're also looking at the way in which their manufacturing enterprise is operated. There's a lot of efficiencies to be found in motors and drives, for instance. So getting out of those silos, as Melanie had said before, and looking at holistically is actually a central, fundamental part of sustainability. I'll observe that in the Green City Index, as I said before, the cities that have environmental governance scores that are fairly high, those who have had programs in place across all of 9 of those indicators, and especially for a long period of time, absolutely scored at the top of the index. Vancouver actually scored quite well. Number 10, that was your lowest score of all of the indicators, but number 10 is pretty darn good out of 27 cities. And the reason Vancouver wasn't at the top on that particular indicator was because of transparency, which Vancouver is doing a tremendous amount to improve, getting the word out to citizens. The interrelationship between buildings, between transportation, a great, energy consumer, also water, which, as I said earlier, consumes a lot of energy use and CO2 emissions is very clear, scientifically very clear. So you look at a city like Vancouver, they're scoring high in all of those indicators, and that's because of their holistic approach.
Okay, thank you. What do you think the impacts will be from the move towards green cities on how we design and construct buildings and develop communities? So, and for that, what does the building sector need to offer in terms of knowledge, skills, technology, funding, programs, things like that? What do you see? Melanie, you want? Oh, Dave's starting.
I think that the biggest fundamental change is something I tried to cover a bit in my presentation was this idea that we know we can no longer be bounded by the property line in terms of thinking about our how to green our buildings, right? A lot of the leading edge green buildings that we see now, like for example, a living building at the University of British Columbia, the CERS project, wouldn't be able to achieve its regenerative building status were it not borrowing waste energy heat from a neighboring building and then using that heat within its own operations. So I think that what's going to be really required is looking at how cities can get better and get out of the way in terms of allowing projects owned and operated and built independently to cooperate in terms of energy use, in terms of water use, in terms of wastewater treatment, and figuring out a way to do that incrementally over time, I think is going to be the real challenge, because it's easy to do on, say, new construction, but on the existing building side, which is really where most of our emissions come from, it's a much harder nut to crack. So I think that's one of the big challenges moving forward.
Look, I think I'd agree. And in terms of, I think, moving from this building to a precinct type scale, I think there's a really clear role for building owners type organisations, such as the Green Building Council or property councils that you may have here, to have a much deeper engagement with utility owners. I think, if we look at energy, water and waste, there's only so much that you can do on a particular site. And I think, if you look at that more holistically, that there's actually a huge opportunity there for building owners. So I know in Australia that we spent, in the last 5 years, $46 billion on energy network upgrades, and that's to provide, I suppose, bigger copper wires into the city to provide for peak energy use. Now, as a building, as a building industry, if the industry could get together and say, look, actually, if we built our buildings in a slightly different way, and we provided a reduction in the amount of money that you had to spend, there's a massive pool of money there that are being spent by utilities that dwarfs the kind of expenditure we're having on new buildings. And therefore, there's a big pool of money, a big opportunity there, I think, for building owners to really provide an advantage to the networks, and therefore also generate some economic benefit as well.
And I would just say, from the San Francisco perspective, we're very much looking at the precinct scale, district energy type solutions that will address bringing together individual buildings that are green. So that's something that I think is really a trend and something that we're going to be focusing on in San Francisco. Again, that initiative has really forced us to bring together a lot of actors and stakeholders that weren't necessarily working together before to look at how these solutions can really be comprehensive. So I think that one is one specific trend. And then in terms of where the building sector can really help, I would say just from our perspective, a willingness to innovate and a willingness to participate, especially for existing buildings that have been online for decades and have had property managers and ownership that have done things a certain way, but really looking at these new neighborhood scale or precinct scale opportunities to change the way that they do business, to make additional investments, to pilot new projects, so that cities who have the willingness and interest to do it have a good partner in the building sector.
Okay. Alison, you're just going to say, in terms of being mindful of time, because we're getting, and I do want to have it that we can open up to the floor. I'm just wondering if we can go to the last question and have some closing comments from you on that one. So the future, what's next? What do we see? And right now, is the focus on sustainability for mayors and city councils about votes? Will it go away? Is it here to stay? How do you see that for the future?
Well, that relates to the comment I was going to make in the last question, actually. I think it would be important to think about buildings as a benefit to human health. We think a lot about potential toxins within a building, et cetera, but actually the built environment can benefit human health. It can benefit productivity. Natural light is something that's been shown to be very conducive to productivity for workers, and also as a healing environment and a learning environment in schools. There's not that much research on this, and I think that is some of the future of looking at the built environment as an actual benefit, and I think that's certainly something that cities should pay attention to on the part of its constituents. As far as sustainability is here to stay, yes, I think it is sustainable. I think that there are bottom line benefits that the corporate environment recognizes about sustainability, so I do not see signs of sustainability going away in the business sector. There are a lot of voluntary efforts, and businesses are competing on indices such as a Green City Index as well, Dow Jones Sustainability Index being one of them. So from my point of view, in my particular sector, I certainly think it's here to stay.
Melanie, you want to take this one first?
And I would say that I do not think it's a fad. I think that part of the reason that we've gotten so much great support in San Francisco from entities like our local BOMA chapter and from property owners and property managers is because there's the financial bottom line that is benefited through these green actions. And that was one of the things that we were most pleased about when we were doing this existing commercial building ordinance where we're mandating energy disclosure, that we got stakeholders coming to the table saying, we want to do this anyway because it decreases our vacancy rates, and we want to have buildings that are full, and in San Francisco there is a demand for green space. So from our perspective, it is not a fad. It's something that definitely is here to stay. And I would say, a focal point for us is we will continue to be doing energy efficiency and renewable energy and retrofitting existing buildings. There is a lot of interest locally in bringing living systems into buildings. I think that's been touched on a little bit here, but really how to integrate basically making buildings living and thinking about green spaces and recycled water use and trying to make it an integrated system, not just retrofitting an existing building, but making it a living, breathing entity that is beneficial.
Look, just quickly, I think, it definitely is here to stay, and I'll give one more economic type reason of why I think that's the case. I've had quite a few conversations with recruiters from all around the world over the years. We get, people wanting to come and work for the city. We get quite a few applications through the door. And what the recruiters are telling us anecdotally, and there's also been a few studies around it, is really especially in economies that are more knowledge-based, like Canada and like Australia, where you've got knowledge-based economies in cities, that people are really starting to choose the city they want to work in first and foremost before they pick the job. So they decide, I want to live in a particular city. And, a lot of that is about making sure that your city, one of the factors of that is how green is that city and how livable is that city. And so I think if you're going to be an economically viable and sustainable city going forward, that you really are going to have to create an environment for those knowledge workers to want to live and work there.
Yeah, I'd say yes. I mean, obviously I'm biased, but I think it's here to stay. But I think that one of the advantages that Vancouver's had and what we've been able to achieve is that, we have, similar to San Francisco, over a decade of strong environmental political leadership. I mean, whether you've been a red mayor or a blue mayor, you've always been a green mayor. And, even our right-of-center political party, has built more kilometers of bike lanes than anybody else in Vancouver history. So I would say that, there has been, I think that and our last election, there was a bit of an election issue about whether, we should keep on pursuing the environmental agenda, and there was a resounding success for the party that was pushing for the environmental agenda, so Gregor Robertson and the Vision Slate. So I think that there is strong support from the electorate moving forward. I'd say in terms of what's the future, I think, you kind of heard it resonate a little bit throughout the presentations today, but I think that from a solutions provision perspective, I think you'll see the debates move less or more away from the technology side and more onto the financing, the human systems, the organizational structural stuff. Because, I think that everyone knows the solutions are out there now. We have the technology, right? The barriers to sustainability are rarely economic. They're never technological, but they're always institutional and behavioral. So I think really resolving a lot of those issues, building robust programs and financing tools and kind of, creating that human change, I think will be the focus of a lot of kind of our work moving forward.
Okay, great. Can we open it up to the floor? We've probably got about 10 minutes or so. Does anybody have any questions from the floor? And have we got microphones out there? Can't really see. Anybody? Questions? I see one here in the front. I guess so. Do we have mics? Oh, sorry, the mics are there. Sorry, there are mics there. I see it now.
Yeah. There's actually two mics right
Yeah.
up in there. They're there, honestly.
It's just, I have a question for San Francisco. You mentioned 100% renewables in 10 years. Is there, there's no concern from utilities in terms of intermittency? They don't have a cap on how much renewables you can put in the grid?
So On the 100% renewable topic, Mayor Lee convened a task force that has been meeting over the past year, the Mayor's Renewable Energy Task Force, and our local utility has been part of that task force. What we're really looking at is an alternative to our utility to provide 100% renewable power for some San Franciscans who want it in the short term. As you might know, in California there is an RPS standard where they do need to provide at least 33% renewable power by 2020. So there is already a mandate for our utilities to do at least that well, if not better, depending on how much their customers are demanding it. So it's a delicate balance and dance that we are doing right now with working with our utility and asking them to do as much as they can, and they have done quite a bit, but there's more to do. But then also thinking about other options. I did mention the Community Choice Aggregation Program, which is an energy program where our municipal utility would provide an option for residents in San Francisco to buy 100% renewable power. So we have options and we are exploring them, but we do want to reach the 100% renewable energy.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, there's a question over here.
There's owners in cities that aren't necessarily going to take up the sustainable design idea and want to invest in it. There was some talk about maybe monitoring how much energy that certain buildings are using. Are cities kind of thinking about taxing based on that extra usage?
So why don't we have Vancouver deal with this one first, being it's probably mostly Canadians in the room.
Not from a taxation perspective. Something that we're proposing for council in the fall is something we're calling our fee-bate initiative, whereby the permit fees and the development fees that you will pay as part of your development will be indexed based on your predicted energy performance, so, and which has to be third-party verified. So, for example, if we have a lot of people who build, say, to the letter of our building code, but not necessarily in the spirit of our building code, and that's fine. They'll just pay more expensive, development permit fees. But that extra revenue will then go to people who, if they beat our building code by 20 or 30%, then they might pay free fees, or they might get a cash benefit of $30 or $40 or $50,000 for building that efficient building. So we haven't got to the taxation side yet. We only really collect property tax, and our finance system is guards the simplicity of that property tax collection system very, very jealously. So, and their desire to keep it simple is I guess justified when you look at how complex tax law can become quite quickly.
But is it not a little bit of an advantage for them not to be buying into the green, where their property values aren't going to go up as much as, say, a very sustainable building? So they're making a fair bit of money on their building and then getting that added benefit of lower tax based on the value of their building. So just a thought.
The idea has merit. I know that there are lots of states in the United States that actually do provide tax forgiveness or tax incentives for building, say, a LEED project.
And we haven't looked at that yet, but that's an interesting idea.
Another question from this side?
Hi, Brenda Martins from Vancouver, Canada's greenest city. Chris, you mentioned that Sydney's is a knowledge-based economy, and that's true for Vancouver and San Francisco as well. So our emissions come from transportation and buildings largely, but we consume at North American standards or Australian standards, so we're transferring that impact elsewhere where the manufacturing occurs, but we're still responsible for the consumption. Do any of your plans consider reduction in consumer consumption?
Do you mean in materials or just in energy? Or
Materials.
Materials. Look, I suppose our focus to date has really been more on the utility space, about reducing that. But in terms of materials, of late we've really started to get involved in the collaborative consumption type movement, which is really an opportunity to swap goods between peer-to-peer rather than from companies to organisations. So you get activity without further consumption essentially. And we're finding that some of those models are also having really good social outcomes as well, because neighbours are starting to talk to each other, they're starting to interact in ways that they hadn't previously. And a lot of the, I suppose, the mobile kind of technology is also facilitating that outcome as well. So I think collaborative consumption is a major concept that really will be taken up in the coming years around cities, because it has the potential to get greater activity, greater utilisation of existing assets without greater consumption of resource.
And in San Francisco, we are looking at consumption issues and figuring out if there is a way that we can quantify and measure reduction in consumption. That isn't something we've released yet, but we are looking at different methodologies for doing that in different sectors. But Chris and I, and Allison and I, were talking a little bit earlier about this whole idea of collaborative consumption, and it is something that is a hot topic for us in San Francisco now that we have done so well with traditional recycling and as well as with composting programs. We're really thinking about creative and innovative ways to help us get to that zero waste goal, and thinking about consumption and finding positive, economically driven ways to create new economies around buying less and sharing more is really something interesting that we're looking at, and may do some outreach and education programs around it next year.
Good. I see a question over on the side.
We've got 3 of the best cities in the world in these issues, but we've also got a lot of cities across Canada and the world that really don't have the regulatory or the fiscal powers to implement a lot of these things. In particular, the deficits in infrastructure. I know that Vancouver, Toronto, most Canadian cities have got a lot of combined sewers that are struggling to finance. I'd like to hear your thoughts about how to finance these kinds of investments in infrastructure.
Well, I think if we've learned anything today, if we want to be a truly sustainable city, you have to put your city next to an ocean and then build a large bridge next to it. I think that's just the way to do it. It seems. Yeah. That seems to be the only. Upper house or swoopy structure on the water. Yeah. So. In all seriousness, the replacement of our combined sewer outflow system is the single largest capital expenditure that the City of Vancouver makes. In our last capital plan, it was $200 million in terms of replacing our combined sewers, and it's a struggle, to tell you the truth. It's to make the case for something as well too. I mean, it's not very sexy proposition a lot of time for taxpayers as well too. But I think that we're starting to look to models like Portland, Oregon, which has actually, when you look at their stormwater management program, they've taken a real strong, integrated stormwater management approach, for example, where they're trying to build resiliency at the site scale rather than sort of these mega infrastructure projects of old, right? Where we are, instead of, conveying that water, over, many kilometers and miles to a facility or eventually to that receiving body that, we deal with it on site. So I think that there is, as budgets get more constrained, I think you're going to see more at-site or neighborhood scale solutions that can be more modest, that can be developed incrementally rather than, committing to a 50-year, billion-dollar or several $100 million capital, reinvestment strategy.
Yeah, I think, look, the technology is available at the moment to do this sort of decentralized approach, and really when you start to investigate that, you get away from a lot of the cost associated with the centralized solutions that have traditionally been put in. And I suppose an example, in our total water cycle management approach, we are looking at providing a recycled water source, potentially also through sewer mining. And when we do that, we actually see that the other benefit is that we have a sewer system in Sydney that's 70, 100 years old. It's getting toward the end of its life. It's got leaks quite a bit, and that causes water quality issues as well. But if we can reduce the load on that sewer by say 10 or 20%, instead of having to replace that sewer, you can then potentially say sleeve inside the existing sewer, and that significantly reduces the cost of some of these types of infrastructure. So unless you really have this sort of integrated thinking approach, you can't come up with solutions that solve multiple problems. And I think with the energy side of things too, the decentralised energy approach really starts to address that peak energy demand, which is the really major driver for energy network requirements. And so that's why also our proximity principle around renewables, if we generate them locally, we therefore don't need such a large grid to pull in those large-scale renewables from outside the city as well. So you've got to look at total societal cost around these things and look at these solutions in innovative ways to reduce the overall costs.
And one example I can give from San Francisco's perspective is around our infrastructure that supports our recycling and composting program. In San Francisco, we have something called pay-as-you-throw, where the garbage bills are paid by the customers. And there are many cities in the U.S. that do not have that, where the garbage service is supported by taxes and by the municipality. And through the rates that we've been able to charge that are relatively low for recycling, composting, and trash service, the Recology, our private sector partner, has been able to invest quite a bit in the infrastructure that's required to help us achieve the 78% diversion rate. It's the same with our water infrastructure, where there is a water bill that goes out to local customers, and they are right now undergoing $1 billion infrastructure upgrade for our water system in San Francisco. So it's a politically heavy lift in a lot of communities that are looking at figuring out how to diversify sources of funding beyond taxes and beyond general fund, but there are a lot of sustainability directors that are trying to think creatively about these options and seeing what can be done to bring in additional sources of revenue for infrastructure, because it's certainly needed.
I just might call to your attention to follow. It's actually an evolving program. The city of Philadelphia in the United States is actually embarking on a quite controversial program to charge for stormwater discharge volumes. And even schools and churches are getting these big bills and forecasting these large bills and trying to figure out how to change their stormwater drainage patterns as a result. So it's certainly making a difference. It's also quite controversial and very interesting to follow.
Okay, so I see one more here and one more there, and I think we've got to let Thomas close off the conference for us. So over here, please.
All right, in terms of funding, certainly a lot of the infrastructure replacement, both in waterworks, transportation, does cost a lot. And when you look at the sort of taxation pie that a citizen pays, the majority of it goes to the state or the province or the federal government. Has there been any progress in any of your cities or regions in working with the province or state or the federal government in getting some additional revenue back from the state, or getting a larger piece of the pie, I guess, as opposed to additional new taxes, having a reduction that flows up towards the federal government as opposed to the traditional down?
This could be a very simple no.
Look, I'll start because I'm not in Canada, so I can speak a bit more freely. Look, we had that same issue in Sydney. 50% of the revenue from the State Water Authority goes back to the state, just as general revenue, and I think about 25% from the energy network provider as well, which is also state-owned. So we have those issues, and I think the only way that you're ever going to change that is by building the business case for showing a better solution. And so what we're trying to do through that master planning exercise is say, look, there's a better way of doing things. There's a lower societal cost to provide the same amenity, if not better amenity, in a more sustainable way to society than providing it through the centralised solution, and then start to, really lobby for those funds and help and get funding from them. And actually, only a couple of hours ago, I just got an email through that we'd just been successful in winning an award, funding from the state and from the federal government for implementing the trigeneration scheme at Town Hall. So that's a great example of, you've got to have a strong business case and real good strategy behind it in order to really try and extract some of those funds back into your city.
In San Francisco, the answer is yes. We did get quite a bit of funds, as well as many U.S. cities, through the stimulus package that was at the federal level. Unfortunately, most of that has now been spent and dried up. So there still are federal grants available, but there's less available at the federal level. At the state level in California, we're doing a lot of work right now on looking at the revenues that will be generated through the landmark law AB 32 that was passed a few years ago, that is a mandatory cap and trade program that will be implemented implemented soon in California. And there are billions of dollars that will be generated through the trading of those pollution credits. And there's a lot of different interest from lots of different communities about where those revenues are going to go. We are part of a coalition of localities that are talking with the state government about ensuring that some of those state funds that are generated through that program do get reinvested at the local level. So it certainly is a source of funding and something that we're actively working on pursuing.
And I would just say that sort of the Vancouver municipal, or to the Canadian municipal level, I mean, we're primarily limited to applying for, the existing grant programs that either come out from the provincial or federal programs. One thing that has been a big benefit to us has been the Climate Rebate Action Incentive Program, CARIP, where essentially we get the money back from the provincial government that we pay in our carbon tax, and that amounts in the City of Vancouver's about $950,000 a year that we get back from the province, and that essentially funds all of our work at the sustainability group, pays for all of our staff, pays for all of our program budget for the year, and we actually are able to pretty successfully leverage that 2 or 3 or 4 times over, usually just by going through incentive programs. But I know that politicians are always constantly at FCM and other lobbying agencies to try to get more money out of this and more gas tax revenue, et cetera.
Okay. Final question over here.
So just looking at the panel, I see 2 cities represented that have had recently successful bids to secure the Olympics on the subject of infrastructure money. And there was a recent story, I believe, in the Globe and Mail about maybe Toronto wants to once again try to go to the dance and get the Olympics here. Can that catalyze a city like Toronto to become maybe number 4 on the list? Or
I actually think this is a question for me, because I'm currently working on the Pan Am sports venues for Toronto. And I think the interesting thing about that is, firstly, the village, which is on a brownfield site, which we've never really figured out what to do with, and being at the mouth of the Don, which also has to be looked at. And our deep water cooling, our district energy system being at capacity, it has now raised a whole bunch of issues in the downtown core that we have needed to look at for quite some time. The buildings are all targeting LEED Gold in the village. My understanding is there is an innovation that might take it to LEED Platinum. And for all of the sports venues, which is regional, so Golden Horseshoe. So I was having a discussion last night with a producer at TSN who's saying, I'm not in support of this because we're building these venues. But if you look at Sydney, for example, and how many pools they have, and if you talk to people here whose children are in sports, they go great distances to get that kind of training. And so we are actually putting infrastructure throughout a number of cities in the Golden Horseshoe that are helpful for those local communities. And all of those are targeted minimum LEED Silver, but similarly, LEED Gold seems to be the minimum that they're looking at. So if anybody else wants to jump in, you can jump in on Toronto. We're always kind of under the gun lately.
Well, I would just say in San Francisco, although we haven't had the Olympics yet, we do have the America's Cup coming this year and next year. And certainly having an international sporting event in your city is a great catalyzer for action. You're all of a sudden on the world stage with everyone looking at your city about what sustainability actions did you take and are you taking. So I think it is, it's something to pursue for Toronto, for sure.
I think that the primary benefit for Vancouver was that, given especially the financial uncertainty of 2008, I mean, we were committed to building the Olympic Village, and, it was kind of like Cortez, where he burnt the ships and we had to, carry on. And so there was no choice but to keep on building the Olympic Village and to keep on carrying out on the way we had. And we always knew it was going to be a lot of square footage of residential development for the market to, accept at any given time. But I think it's proven out now. I mean, we have one building left to sell, and sales are going quite well. So, they've picked up again. So I think that it's kind of shown the power that green building can kind of have in terms of, creating value beyond the project. I think it was a transformative learning experience, as I said earlier, in terms of, we did about 12 years of city building in that neighborhood in about 3 years, and it was like the world's biggest integrated design project that carried on for 3 years as well too, because we were building infrastructure and roads and buildings all at the same time, and also doing the permitting and the policy making around it at that time too, because this is a lot of this stuff even kind of predates, like the planning for it predated the Canadian Green Building Council, so it was a very a learning experience for us as staff that I think has been invaluable, and yeah. But a lot of stars aligned for it to be a really valuable experience. Is the only caution I would throw out there.
Excellent. Please join me in thanking our terrific panelists, Melanie, Chris, Dave, and Allison.